Episode 34 of the Glass of Joe podcast. As always, joined by Joe Malfi and PJ Glasser. We got our buddy Ryan Wormeli back for the third time, Joe. This time as an official guest.
First official, though, yes.
Official guest.
Yes, there we go.
So we get even more worm than possible, talking Ravens, a little bit of Pixar, Marvel movies, and Worm, could he nail his trivia question? We love playing Sporkle with him.
Love it.
So you'll have to.
That was a big staple when we were, pre-COVID. We were able to all be in the office at NBC Sports Washington.
Yep.
Anybody who hasn't heard any previous episodes with Worm, we work with him at NBC. He's the unofficially official Ravens correspondent of the office for whatever Ravens content comes out of our office, which is more than you'd think, considering we're mostly a Washington football team based organization. It all goes through him. Articles, anything that goes on air. He's the Ravens guy in the building. So we have him on talking plenty of Ravens. But again, like I said, pre-COVID, whenever we were back there, whenever we'd have downtime at work, we're hopping on Sporkle, going through
always do the sport,
all different types of things.
Yep.
So we were excited to have him on for his trivia segment, and you will see later if he can get it or not. Before we get to Worm, with a heavy dose of post-mortem on the Ravens, let's get back to that divisional round that we saw this past week. It kind of pretty much went chalk. I mean,
it did. And the crazy thing, Joe, is that all the games were 10 points or more, except for the Chiefs and Browns game, which was a 10-point game. But then I don't know if you saw the line closed at like Chiefs -7. Yeah. So there was something that was fishy going on. Mahomes getting hurt obviously helped all the Browns backers. But man, Cleveland will be kicking themselves at the end of the first half with Rashard Higgins fumbling the ball into the end zone. What are your thoughts on that rule?
That rule, that is the worst. That is the worst rule in the NFL that is easily rectifiable. I put it that way for a specific reason. There's a lot of other rules in the NFL that also stink, but I don't know that there's a solution to certain things, or there is, but it's not as easy as you think. That's one that is so simple. Any other part of the field,
right? You
fumble it out of bounds, you just bring it back to where you fumbled it. Why is it different there? And if you want to say, well, you can't go that far in the other direction of making it an advantage for the offense. Again, first of all, anywhere else on the field, they keep the ball. So why is it different there? But if you wanted to do that, if you wanted to say there's something specially sacred about fumbling it out the end zone instead of just through the sideline, pull them back to the 20-yard line and make it, if it was first and goal, now you're at second and goal from the 20. The ball should not change possession for that reason. That is so stupid.
What the stupidest part of the rule is, honestly, is if Higgins fumbles that ball and a Browns player recovers it in the end zone, it goes back to the spot of the fumble. So they don't even get the touchdown. There's it's the rule. I'm with you.
If you can't advance it, then why is it not your ball? It doesn't make any sense at all.
And, it happens maybe less than 10 times a season, but when it happens in a magnitude of this game, it obviously brings an uproar. And
I don't think it cost them the game. I don't think it cost them the game because so much happened after that.
Sure.
Would the Chiefs have played certain things the way they did? Then Mahomes got hurt. So that then turned out to favor the Browns. It's not the reason they lost, but it's still just a frustrating, annoying thing that needs to be rectified in the NFL.
And the stones on Andy Reid to go for that 4th and 1 with Chad Henne at midfield. Just bravo to Andy. I mean, I could never do it.
There, look, I know Romo.
Man.
It was great TV with Romo saying, "Oh, there's no way they're snapping this. There's no way they're snapping this. Look at their body language. They're not moving." It's great TV in that aspect. But I was sitting there saying, they're snapping this ball. Andy Reid's going for this. I knew they were going for. I'm not saying I'm some genius here. I just had a gut feeling that he was doing it because at the end of the day, I didn't know if Henne was going to run up to the line and take a quick QB sneak snap. I didn't know what they were going to do. But Andy Reid, that's his MO. He's a risky guy.
He is.
And when you factor in that Henne is a good veteran who you can trust and all the weapons they have, I think you're stupid not to go for it. Pick up an inch, win the game, done. So it did not catch me off guard. What I did think they were going to do was take a down, call timeout, and then go from there.
Sure.
But I thought they were going for it for sure.
And on the possession before that, Cleveland needs to go for a fourth down there. Once you punted the ball back, even though you were on like your own 30-yard line, let the Chiefs kick a field goal. And Butker was struggling, let him make the kick. You're still down 8. You have a chance to score a touchdown and go for 2. But that game, a lot going on. The other game that happened on Sunday, Joe, you had Saints, Bucs, and look, it's a big reason I like Green Bay this week against Tampa, which we'll get into later on. But the turnovers for the Saints just killed them. That great defense of theirs, even they couldn't overcome 4 turnovers. Tampa Bay scored at least a field goal or a touchdown on each of the turnovers. And that Jared Cook fumble really just flipped everything. The Saints were up a touchdown. They were in control. You give Tampa that life, and you just knew they were going to score. They did, and it changed everything.
It changed the whole game. And again, even after that, they had plenty of opportunities.
Yeah.
But that's when it came down to Drew Brees and the noodle arm. And I've said this all year. It's a conversation that I've had with my dad. And he's like, but you could win passing short. You could win it. You can do it. Look how all those years with Brady, they built it on a short passing game to Edelman and to Gronk and Hernandez and Lewis out of the backfield and Falk out of the backfield. You can do it. You can do it if there's even a threat of throwing deep, because every now and then he'd still take the top off of the defense with at least a 20-plus yard pass to Gronk in the seam or to somebody on the outside. There was never a threat. I mean, Brees hasn't been able to throw the ball more than 15 yards all season. The interception that White had when they were trying to target Kamara up the seam, yes, Kamara continued his run when Brees thought he was going to break it off and come back. But the reason that White was able to jump that pass instead of sticking with Kamara up the field is because he knew that Brees was not going to throw it deep. If there was even a threat of Brees throwing it deep, he would not have been able to jump that the way he did. It comes down to Brees was not able to do what he's done in the past. And I said all year long, it's fine in the regular season. If you get down in the playoffs in crunch time, especially if you're down late in a game and you have to have a vertical passing game, he's not able to do it. And he wasn't able to do it. The only good deep ball we saw all day was the Jameis Winston trick play.
That's right. That was the only good one. I'm with you. And obviously not having Mike Thomas anywhere near 100% killed them. They never really got Kamara. Taysom Hill too. I thought Taysom was a huge injury for that game. Sean Payton loves to steal about 7 or 8 offensive plays with him on the field, and he couldn't go to that. Last thing I'll say about this game, Joe, Devin White is a star. Top 3 middle linebacker in football. He was all over the field, and he's going to need to be that again for Tampa when they face Green Bay. Green Bay took care of their business against the Rams. This was your upset special of the weekend. But
I told you I didn't love it, but I was going to stick with it. It was one of those that I've been pounding the table for the Rams for 6+ weeks, and I wasn't going to shy away from it, and I probably should have shied away from it.
Once Aaron Donald, was hurt.
There were certain things in there that didn't help me out in the end, like Donald.
Kupp was hurt,
but I stuck to my guns, and I'm proud that I did at least. But
look, they made it a game, and then the defense just could not. That Packers offense, oh man, are they good? They are good. They are really good.
For all the games that went under last week, we'll get to it in a bit. They're going to see a lot of points this week, and I'm excited for it. But that game was probably, I don't want to say not impacted by the snow, by the weather. But I don't think the weather had as big of an impact in the end as people thought. There was the whole thing about.
I'm with you.
There was the whole thing about Goff and his thumb. Goff had a good game. He didn't throw many completions. He was efficient. It didn't look like it was a problem. I don't think on either side, for all the talk about the weather in that game, I don't think it had a big impact. And for 32-18, both teams putting up points. The Rams had some squandered opportunities. I don't think the weather was as big of a factor in that game as people made it out to be. And on the flip side of that, then obviously the Ravens-Bills game, it was a way bigger impact than people thought it was going to be.
Sure, yes.
Because people were like, myself included, I was like, as long as it's not snowing, I'm picking the Ravens. We're all focused on, is it going to snow? Is it going to snow?
And here comes the wind.
And it turns out of nowhere that it's a tornado apparently over Orchard Park. Like, those games were completely opposite. Everybody thought the weather was going to impact the Rams game. It was snowing, but it was more of a picturesque, fun Lambeau.
Yeah, footing wasn't an issue at all.
Exactly. But then the Bills game, against the Ravens, that changed everything, the weather in that one.
It did. And again, that's why a team like Buffalo, a team like Green Bay, a team like if Cleveland or Chicago ever gets a high seed, New England for all those years. I mean, when those team gets it, weather plays such a big factor. And that's why it's such an advantage for teams like that to get the higher seeds. Joe, there was some breaking news actually as we record this. The Colts offensive coordinator Nick Sirianni just got hired as the Eagles' new head coach, 39-year-old guy. That's significant because we're just getting ready to talk about Phillip Rivers and how he's retiring, and now the OC for the Colts are moving on. Do you think Drew Brees, it's kind of writing on the wall, it appears. I don't know if you saw, but as Brees was leaving the field, going out of the tunnel, he took one look back inside the Superdome at the field, and I'm like, man, that is that's
the way
that's
he
some
looked,
good stuff.
The way he looked all season long. He put up the numbers. He put up the numbers because, again, like I said, in the regular season, you can be quick, paper cut offense, efficient. Sure. But even in the regular season, there were games where he got exposed because he had to throw deep down the field. That game against the Chargers, when they should have lost, if not for Badgley missing multiple field goals, couldn't throw the ball down the field. When they lost to the Raiders, couldn't throw down the field. So I think for him, it's better to go out now. It's obviously his decision. I can't make the decision for him. But just as far as perception, even though he won a Super Bowl in his last season in the NFL, Peyton Manning, people looked at him that year like, I wish he retired a year earlier. Definitely. Because he was not even close to himself.
No.
Brees in the regular season at least looked somewhat himself. You could see in moments he couldn't throw deep. That was it. But he still put up the numbers. It was still fun. Got exposed in the playoffs. And I'm afraid that if he tries to hold on for one more year, we're going to see Drew Brees against the Bucs for 16 games in the way that we did for Peyton Manning that year. And the only thing that saved Peyton Manning that year was actually getting hurt. Because by getting hurt, Osweiler came in that year, remember, played a long time. Manning came back for the playoffs fresh. Still couldn't do much in the playoffs, but the defense carried them to the title. So I hope he's done. And if he is, I mean, that's a heck of a Hall of Fame class of 2026.
I wonder if Brees is watching. I wonder if Brees is watching tape of Tampa last week leading up to the game, and he's like, Jesus, Tom's 43, and look at what he's putting out on tape. Yeah. Rodgers is over there, 37. He's going to win MVP. So, yeah, looking like Brees will walk away. What a career. Big Ben's really the only question mark left. I think he's going to come back for one more year.
I do too.
But, man, the Steelers, they got to get a run game for him. The O-line needs to be better. But Ben, he's put so much into that organization. Brees at least is leaving the Saints knowing that they're still in a great spot. The Steelers, I mean, if Ben leaves, you're going to turn the keys over to Mason Rudolph. You're going to go get –
No, I mean, they have to figure something out. And even the Saints, like, I'm still not 100% sold on Taysom Hill.
No, me either.
Jameis Winston. What kind of development has he been doing under Brees? So, but still, it's better than Mason Rudolph. But again, it's one of those things where if either or both decide to walk away, they owe their organizations nothing. Big Ben won him 2 rings.
Sure.
Brees brought him back from Katrina. He got him a ring. Like those 2 guys can step away with no regrets. I wish I could say the same for Rivers. He left it all out there. He played that AFC title game with a torn ACL. Like he gave it all. I wish it had a ring for him in the end at some point along the way. So he will maybe never have that mental closure as far as that goes. But as far as Brees and if we get into that discussion with Ben, those 2 guys, people should not at all talk about, the position that they leave their franchises in. It's not his fault that the Steelers have no fallback plan right now, or it's not the Saints' fault. I mean, Brees' fault that the Saints have 2 kind of question marks behind him. That should not even be part of the conversation.
Real quick, Phillip Rivers, Hall of Famer, yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. I think he's first ballot Hall of Famer too, not just a Hall of Famer.
Wow.
For me, you look at the stats side by side. The question would be Eli Manning if he didn't have the 2 rings.
Sure.
But Rivers, on his merits, the stats alone, he is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think there's a question about it. Like I said, from that draft class, the question would be Manning had he not earned both of those Super Bowl rings.
Well, a guy who has gotten a lot of votes here on our podcast, Ryan Wormeli, making his third appearance, this time his first as an official guest, coming up next.
You've seen him as a special guest for some Pixar movies, as a special guest the one time PJ surprised me when we were talking some Ravens. Now we finally have our first official credit for our dear friend Ryan Wormeli. I refuse to say your name the correct way because the other way is more fun. You are. I guess thinking back to last year. I know things have changed with COVID and this and that, but you're technically our official NBC Sports Washington Ravens correspondent per your writing for them and being on their playoff shows last year when there were shows because before COVID. So you are our official Ravens correspondent, and we couldn't think of a better time to have you on because of our Ravens post-mortem discussions from last week. So we have specific questions that PJ and I want to get into about the future of the Ravens. But first, we just got to flesh out the rest of our discussion that we were starting to have on Twitter. Now, for listeners who don't follow all three of us on Twitter and didn't want to go down that rabbit hole, kudos to you. You would have wasted your time. But the gist of it is this. After the game, I said that the Ravens have one more year in their window, and then a couple years from now, they're going to be looking at that Lamar contract as an albatross. To which Worm said
that there's no thing we've ever seen him do that makes us – there's no evidence that he's going to be an albatross in a couple of years.
Which is fair. And the analogy that I went to, for anybody who's seen it, is the movie The Big Short, where Christian Bale's character is like down 1,000% with his investment. And then at the end of the movie, he's up like 9,000% with his investment. So I'm like, I understand like right now that Lamar is all the hype. And, you know, I'm just looking at it like forest from the trees perspective right now. We sort of started going in different directions. You talked about his efficiency. You talked about all the records he set last year. I'm looking at when it comes down to beating the best teams and looking at the trends of the league, that it's a passing league. The 4 teams in the conference championship games this week are 1 through 4 in passing DVOA. And I look at what they've done as a rushing team, which is elite, will never be duplicated. Passing wise is my concern. And I stumbled upon the best analogy that I could possibly think of. We kept kicking it around. You know, he's not quite Clayton Kershaw because it's different. It's more just like crumbles under the pressure. We think of James Harden, where his style is great for the video game numbers in the regular season, doesn't do it in the playoffs. We came to that one, and you agreed with that one, sort of, Worm, where he's got the crazy video game numbers in the regular season, hasn't done it in the playoffs. What I finally stumbled upon that I'm going to stick to is he is Alex Smith with Michael Vick's legs, is the best way that I could put it. He's a ridiculously efficient passer, and he can do everything he can do on the ground. But in the same way that we never saw Alex Smith elevate past the divisional round, because when it came down to crunch time, passing the ball in a passing league to get to that next level, he couldn't do it. That's the best thing I could come down to. Alex Smith and Michael Vick's legs. And now we'll toss it to both of the Ravens fans to continue this on.
Well, I would just say, first of all, that Alex Smith with Michael Vick's legs is like a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback. Like that's
fine. Yeah.
That's a great asset to have running your offense. And I think just about every team would be happy to jump on that.
I just think Lamar's Lamar. I don't really think you can compare him to anybody.
It's so unique.
And he's doing this. He's doing this at such a young age. I don't really remember how old Smith was when he started getting to championship games with Harbaugh, but I mean, he wasn't 23 or 24 years old.
Yeah, I mean, he was drafted in 2005, and they were going to those championship games.
I don't mean it as far as that.
2011, 2012, right?
I just mean to what we were saying.
No, I get what you're saying.
As far as the big sticking point for you believing in Lamar is his efficiency, but efficiency doesn't win you the championship. We've seen that. It's the guy who's going to put the team on his back and throw for 400 yards. We haven't seen a team who's run first, off the top of my head, win a Super Bowl since probably the Giants beat the undefeated Patriots with a 3-headed monster of Bradshaw, Jacobs, and why am I blanking on the third? Who was the third guy for them? Bradshaw, Jacobs, doesn't matter. But that was the last big run first, run heavy team that won the Super Bowl.
But to your earlier point, Joe, there may have been other teams that, or there may not have been other teams that have run the ball as much as the Ravens do that have won the Super Bowl recently. But there also haven't been any other teams recently, maybe ever, that have run the ball as effectively as the Ravens have. One of the interesting points that I've heard the Ravens coaches make, and I've heard some other like these Football Outsiders, PFF type analytical minds make, is, you know, the reason that passing is better than rushing in the modern NFL is it's more efficient. But it's not that passing is so efficient, it's that running is pretty inefficient by and large. Whereas the Ravens, their rushing game is so efficient. It is basically the most prolific, efficient running game in the history of the NFL, that if all teams could run as effectively as the Ravens do, then the analytical models that are as pro pass as it gets would say they should run a lot because it is more effective and there is a slightly less, you know, you're probably not going to have as many turnovers if you're just running versus passing the ball. So like just on the margins, it's a little better. But if the efficiency is close to the same, which the Ravens were last season, and I have no reason to believe they can't be again going forward as long as they fix this offensive line, then it actually is still efficient and the smart analytical choice to run the ball a ton. Maybe not like 80-20, but to still run way more than any other team if it's as effective as it has been.
Now,
To me,
as Shrek so eloquently described ogres, they're like onions with layers. I think this has many layers to it as well. And this is something that we've talked about with PJ, so you chime in too. When it comes to the regular season, there's a big advantage for the Ravens because if they're sandwiched between two teams that are not running an offense close to theirs, and there's nobody in the league that runs an offense similar to the Ravens, it's a tougher preparation. Come to playoff time, when the coaches, that's all they care about. They don't care the week beyond. They don't care about the week before. And odds are, you know, unless they themselves get the bye, odds are the Ravens at some point are going to run into a team coming off a bye where they have an extra week to prepare for that Ravens offense. It's also sets up as a bad spot as what we've seen where they're able to stop Lamar. They're able to force him to throw the ball. Even in that Titans game, you know, they for the most part took away the pass and forced them to run. Now they couldn't really stop the run either because the Titans defense was just atrocious. But it comes down to that part too. And PJ, you touched on that when we were talking last week, that it comes down to being able to have that just focus on that one game. And can the Ravens adapt with Greg Roman to be able to counter that?
The Ravens are the biggest rhythm offense in football. They can't afford to have a 10-yard sack and then try and counteract that. They did it one time when it was 3rd and 17, but their best drive in the Bills game was the opening drive of the game. They went 6 or 7 straight runs. They went right down the field. And then Lamar took that sack, and it flipped everything. They had to settle for the field goal. Tuck hits the post. And then once Justin Tucker misses a 40-yarder, you just can't like your chances of winning a game. But the Ravens' best drive of the entire postseason was their first one out of the locker room against the Titans. It was rhythm with the run. It was pass. Greg Roman came out of halftime and he realizes that he had to go quick passing game, and it was beautiful. And they marched themselves down the field. And just in the Bills game, they could not get into that rhythm. There were too many plays that were negative plays on first down, and they just didn't have enough to come back from that. Lamar, too, looked a little off. I don't know what it was about him, but he just quite didn't look like himself. Maybe it was just the constant pressure that was in his face. Maybe it was the wind that was bothering him. I don't know what it was, but he wasn't quite himself. One thing I'll mention, too, that is quite interesting. The teams that are left in the AFC and NFC championship games, we all talk about the quarterbacks, but they all have number one receivers left. The Chiefs have Hill, the Packers have Adams, the Bucs have Evans, and the Bills have Diggs. You look at the teams that lost in the divisional round. The Rams have Robert Woods, good, solid receiver, not a number one. Cooper Kupp, when he's healthy, same thing, good receiver, maybe not a number one. The Ravens have Hollywood, not a number one. The Browns have Jarvis Landry, good receiver, not really a number one. He's a good complement. And then the Saints have Thomas, but he was not nearly himself.
Yeah, he had 2 surgeries this past week.
2 surgeries,
so
right.
And
To that the
point,
Ravens need to get a good receiver.
Exactly. The reason, I don't. There's a lot of trolls out there who will totally write off Lamar. They want him already cut or move the Ravens to move on from him. That's just asinine. Anybody who thought he shouldn't be a quarterback, stupid. Anybody who thinks that he can't win in the playoffs, is stupid. My thing is that I don't think he could take it to that next level and consistently beat those other top teams in games. So a stat this week, in games where the spread was 3 points or fewer either way. So like when they're going up against somebody that they're punching at their weight, he's 6-6 straight up. So a lot of different factors in that game, but he hasn't really taken the step to elevate his team to another level in that sense yet. But I'm waiting, like you, I want to see what they could do with the number one receiver, but it goes back to what, again, another thing we were talking about, what a lot of people see with this team, that it's predicated on the tight ends. So how it's going to help. It's not going to hurt, obviously, adding an Allen Robinson into the equation. But the question is, how much will it help, considering that he's most efficient when he's throwing between the numbers to the how many times does he hit Andrews and Boyle and last year Hurst, where that's when he's at his best. So how much more effective will he be with a Robinson? I would say to some degree more. But when his bread and butter is inside like that, is that the way to go? Maybe the way to go is to get another tight end after they traded away Hurst, which I never agree with in the first place.
But I mean, first of all, he has elevated the team to a level where they can beat the great teams in the league, because we saw it in all of 2019. They went 14-2. It was a fluky game in the Tennessee loss. Like that was a Murphy's Law. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong situation for them. I'm not going to let that game be a referendum on his career, but the entire regular season, I mean, they won at Seattle against Russell Wilson. They beat the San Francisco 49ers, who were probably one of the two best teams in football. And that was in a downpour, tough environment game. And he was able to lead them to a victory. So we have seen him play up to that level. And even the first two Chiefs matchups were close games. The one from week 3 of the 2020 season was an absolute shellacking, and the Ravens just didn't even belong in the same field as Kansas City that night. But those other two matchups, it's not like he was so thoroughly outclassed that you would say he can't, elevate them to the level that they need to be at. So I think that it's really like PJ mentioned the pressure problems against Buffalo. I don't think you can hammer home enough just how much the offensive line hurt them this season.
And again, of course, but again, in those games, wins are wins in the regular season. And again, my question is, and it's still a small sample size, but at some point it's going to start becoming a trend, not a small sample size. In those Seattle and San Francisco games, Seattle, he was 9 for 20 for 143. He did run for 116 yards. And in the San Francisco game, he was 14 of 23 for 105. He did run for 101 yards. So in the regular season, you see him go off for those 100-plus yard games. My fear with him is, and again, I don't hate him. I want to see you guys enjoy the Ravens. I troll you guys all the time because it's funny. But when it comes to the playoffs, I don't see him running for 100-plus yards, because defenses can key in on that and focus only on that, not worrying about what the next opponent is or the previous opponent. So if he can't run for 116 like he did against Seattle, or 101 like he did against San Fran, and it's just that 9 for 20 for 143 and 14 for 23 for 105, is that going to win divisional rounds, AFC championship games, and so on?
Well, I will say in that Seattle game, I'm pretty sure that was the game where Mark Andrews had like 6 drops. It was like an absolutely brutal performance. Yeah. So his completion percentage could have been a lot higher. And also when you look at the postseason, technically you are right. He hasn't had a great passing performance in the postseason outside of the first game against Tennessee, which was largely in garbage time, a lot of those passing numbers. Yeah. But I will point out he's played 4 postseason games. One of them was as a 21-year-old in an offense that was built for Joe Flacco, where they literally didn't let him try to throw out. I'm throwing that out right away. I don't even listen to that when people use that as an argument against him. So really, in my mind, he's 1-2 in the playoffs, because I just could not care less about that first one. And then in the most recent one, in the loss to the Bills, Josh Allen wasn't passing the ball well either. That was a brutal wind game. I mean, how often do you see 4 missed field goals between the two games, 2 coming from the GOAT kicker? I mean, I'm just not going to hold that against him, that they keyed in on stopping the run, because both teams knew that the other side wasn't going to be able to pass the ball effectively at all during that game. So I really only look at 2 games where I feel like he's even had a chance to show what he can be as a passer in the postseason. Those both happened to come against Tennessee.
That's fair.
I just, and I look at the game against Buffalo, and again, this is my problem with Greg Roman. Like in the regular season, if you want to have a vanilla offense and you just know that the lesser teams in the league won't be able to stop our run game, fine. In the playoffs, though, sometimes it's just one or two games that decide the game. We saw that in Tennessee. It was Lamar's 50-yard scramble that really flipped the game on its head. I mean, Worm, how many times this year did you see Greg Roman throw a wide receiver screen or use Lamar as a decoy like the Saints did with Jameis Winston? One play where they got a touchdown out of it. Lamar is such a weapon that you can use him as a decoy, maybe run him to the side, have a wide receiver come back, toss it to him, and have the wide receiver throw it or something. The Bills were so good at stopping our set offense and what we were going to do that was a kind of game where you maybe needed to run one or two or three kind of trick plays to gain chunk yardage to really try and score a touchdown in that game. And that's where I think that he just, Roman just doesn't do that. He doesn't run trick plays. And in a game like that, I think you kind of need to run something to gain a big play.
You're right that I do think he could do more with the, extra, creative type of play calling. I think that Roman is a decent play caller. I don't know. And it's really hard for casual fans to know about like the route tree combinations in each play and what the actual play design is. So it kind of bothers me when I see people on Twitter say things like, oh, he's running too many tight formations. That's the issue. Like, do we really know? Probably not. It does feel like a lot of times there are receivers in places that I'm confused as to why they would have two so near each other or whatever the situation is. But I think, and this is sort of piggybacking off Joe's, he mentioned Allen Robinson. And of course, Ravens fans everywhere have been, clamoring for a wide receiver for years. It's the only position that they have never had a Pro Bowl player at. They had Jacoby Jones and Jermaine Lewis both as returners. They have never had a Pro Bowl receiver. So obviously it's been a big bugaboo for a long time, but I almost wonder if it's almost like a chicken and egg situation. Does Lamar not throw to the receivers because they aren't developing well enough, or are they not developing because they're not getting their chances on the field? It's hard to say what the right answer is there, but I do think it's notable that, like PJ said, it's not just these Final Four teams. Think about every elite quarterback in the last decade. How many of them don't have a number one receiver?
The only one is
Brady, really.
Yeah. And Brady had Gronk, who's the greatest tight end of all time. So there were really I literally cannot think of any examples of somebody that didn't have at least one, that's a stud receiver that I'm going to draft in the top 3 rounds of fantasy that I know can go play that X position and win outside and win deep and all that.
The Panthers Cam Newton Super Bowl team, that was outside of Brady, that's the only other one that I can think of.
Yeah, that is a good example. And even that was sort of a fluke year. Not a fluke, like he earned his MVP and they earned their trip to the Super Bowl, but that is definitely his career season. It's not like he's ever been close to that before. It's just really hard to do if you don't have the pieces. And the Ravens last season, they had the offensive line at least, but in 2020, they didn't have the receivers or the offensive line. And Lamar is basically Superman, but there's only so much Superman can do.
Of course. Now, we pretty much put a bow on that Lamar conversation. So now to some specific questions about the Ravens. Going forward, instead of looking back, we've touched on it a little bit, but would you say O-line depth or number one receiver? We touched on it a little bit. If you could pick one or the two, now they have obviously avenues to address both via free agency and the draft, but pick one of the two, which would you say is a higher priority?
I had a feeling you were going to ask me this exact question, and it is really a tough one to answer because I think there are very compelling arguments for either one. I think in the past, I would have said offensive line, no matter what, without hesitation. Seeing what Stephon Diggs did for Josh Allen this season is sort of such a clear example of a guy who is athletic and has the skill and arm talent, but is very erratic, getting this one guy and not only getting Diggs and having an immediate connection with him, but seeing the other receivers all excel because they were sort of moved down a spot in the pecking order. I mean, think about Hollywood as a number 2 receiver instead of a number 1. And all of a sudden he looks like one of the better number 2 receivers in football. So many different things can be impacted in a positive way if you just get that one superstar receiver. Having said that, I have said many times that if you look over the course of NFL history at any disappointing team, especially offensively, you can almost always point to the offensive line. You can have great skill talent. You can have even a great quarterback. But if you have an offensive line that is as bad as the Ravens did play on occasion this season, they did have their moments. I think Orlando Brown looked really, much better at left tackle than we expected him to. Bradley Bozeman, I think, is a totally fine, solid left guard. So they had a couple pieces, but by and large, this was a huge step down in the offensive line play from the season before. There is just no overcoming that. Like Lamar, I thought really struggled with his decision-making in the Bills game in terms of when to throw the ball away. And he took a couple of really critical sacks, but I also can't really blame him because there were 3 Bills in the backfield within a half second of every play. It felt like there was just nothing the Ravens could do. So that's sort of a long-winded way of saying in the past, I would have said offensive line no matter what. Now I'm a lot closer to 50-50, but I think like 51-49, I would still go with the offensive line. And the great news is they have the tackles. They have Ronnie Stanley coming back and Zeus, who are maybe the best tackle tandem in the entire NFL. They have a fine left guard. It's really only 2 spots on the offensive line. And you figure if you get one of those solved, you probably have enough pieces that you've drafted in recent seasons, like, the Bredesons and Tyree Phillips that can, maybe you rotate them in at right guard and see who fits the best. But I think if you can find a great center, I don't know, your boy PJ from Alabama, if he's coming back healthy,
Dickerson, yeah.
He played for the draft already.
He did
great.
declare.
Just get somebody who can snap the ball into Lamar's chest. That's all you need.
How crazy is it that 2 different centers got the gift?
That's what I'm saying. Honestly, I thought our best center might have been Cologne Castillo, who played in the Steelers game when all the dudes had COVID. Do you remember RG3 or McSorley really having a bad snap back to them? And like, give this kid a chance. I mean, just give him somebody who can snap the ball.
I don't care if that guy can't block anybody as long as he gets to snap.
Give him a snap. It's I mean, in the NFL, to just be worried about the snap really, really is a problem. And something that the 3 of us were texting about too, if Lamar's got to find a way to get himself comfortable under center, because when Harbaugh is telling Michelle Tafoya that the wind is bothering the snap and shotgun, I mean, that's problemsome. So, and they ran 1-eye formation play when I think it was Dobbins who had it, and he ran for like 11 yards and they never went back to it. And I just didn't understand that. So they got to get back into power football more so. And Lamar's got to get more comfortable under center.
And I will also say, I don't see any reason why, like the old meme of why not both, like, they should address the interior offensive line and they should address receiver. Now, you're not going to be able to get, an established Pro Bowler at both positions. But the thing about picking in the back of the first round, which is the Ravens are at 27 overall this year, is like you can get the 5th or 6th best receiver probably, especially in this class. I mean, so many of those guys are going to go really high, like the Smiths and the Chases and the Waddles. So you can get like the 5th or 6th best guy at receiver. You could probably get the best center. It's pretty rare that a center goes in the top 20, maybe the early 20s if there's a team in need and they're really, really
around
great
the
center.
good range.
Right.
You can probably get one at 20. I really wanted Cesar Ruiz last season, and he went at 26, a couple picks before the Ravens were on the clock.
I'm not complaining about Patrick Queen. I'll draft him 100 times out of 100.
And that was a position of need, but the point.
No, I hear what you're saying.
You could tell that interior offensive line was an area that they could upgrade last offseason. Now it's not that they can upgrade it this offseason. They need to.
Have to.
Yeah.
And so maybe you go out and you take a flyer on Kenny Galladay coming off injury, or maybe you convince Allen Robinson to come play with finally an actual good quarterback for the first time since high school. And then you can draft the top center at, those guys typically can make an impact right away.
Right.
It's not like you're gonna have to wait for him to develop for a few years. And to Joe's point, I don't think Lamar's contract is going to be an albatross in a few years, but next season is definitely the best chance in terms of how the money will be allocated before his big contract extension that you can go quote unquote all in on a Super Bowl. So I would be totally fine paying a receiver and drafting a center first. In fact, that would probably be my preferred method.
Talking about next season, Worm, I mean, are the Ravens the favorites in the AFC behind the Chiefs even? Would you put them ahead of the Bills? Do you still put the Bills ahead of them? You got to figure it'll be the Ravens, Chiefs, Bills, Titans, Indianapolis. Now that Rivers is retired, I've told Joe, I think if Mac Jones goes to Indianapolis, I think they win a Super Bowl within the next 3 years. There are just certain players that fit so well with teams. And I just look at Indianapolis, and I think if Mac goes there, he could be a great fit. The Chargers, I mean, we'll see with the new head coach. Herbert obviously was so impressive But are the Ravens the second or third team, you think, in the AFC in the pecking order?
And this is without projecting what could happen in free agency and the draft. Just
Correct.
General baseline and what each team's going to have as far as the foundation, because we could have this conversation today, and by next week, with all the rumors swirling around it and all the videos that his agent has been putting on Twitter, by next week, Deshaun Watson could be on the Jets. And I'm not just saying that as a homer. So just
you're a little
now,
saying that as a homer.
A little bit, but like right now, foundationally behind the Chiefs and the Bills.
I don't know that I would put them behind the Bills. I mean, the last 2 seasons they've played twice. Each team has won once. And the game that the Ravens lost was in, again, incredibly fluky weather. You know, if he had better protection on the play before the pick six, then he's probably hitting Hollywood Brown, and that's a 10-10 game. So I'm not taking a 14-point loss from last weekend and saying, oh, the Bills are clearly like ahead of the Ravens here. And I also think, I know we're not projecting any specific additions, but like Eric DeCosta is somebody that I definitely trust as a Ravens fan to find holes and attack them. I mean, we saw that last season with the run defense. Like they got run all over by Derrick Henry, so he adds Derek Wolfe and Patrick Queen and Calais Campbell, and all of a sudden they're able to shut down Derrick Henry, you know, when they see him in the playoffs again the next season. So I do think that this team will be better than it was this season. I think he will address the offensive issues in some capacity. And I think if I was saying who I thought the best team was in the AFC behind the Chiefs, obviously, I would say the Ravens. That doesn't necessarily mean they're going to finish, you know, as the 2 seed. Doesn't even guarantee that they win the division, because it's going to be a tough division. And, you know, not only are the Steelers and Browns always going to be at least somewhat of a challenge, not always in that past for the Browns, but now going forward look like they're going to be a challenge. But the Bengals, I mean, Joe Burrow could take that second-year leap even coming off the injury. So, like, it's not a guarantee that they waltz to 13 wins and a you know, spot in the AFC Championship game next year, because obviously they haven't even done that the last 2 years. But I do think if I was building out like just the pure talent on the rosters in all these teams, and Lamar obviously is the biggest key to it all, I think he's probably somewhere in between what we saw in 2019 and what we saw in 2020. And so if 2020 is the quote unquote down year and they still go 11-5 while dealing with the COVID issues, while dealing with terrible injuries, while figuring out how to rebuild this offensive line on the fly, while having a bottom 5 receiving core, like it's hard for me to think that they're going to be too much worse than that. That's a pretty good baseline to be working from. But the other side of it is the quarterback talent, and a few other people have noted this. I've seen online. We've written about it at NBC. The quarterback talent is absolutely outrageous in the AFC right now.
It is.
I was going to actually ask you about that. Specifically, this past week, we saw on the NFC side, we had Rodgers, we had Brady, we had Breeze, we had Goff, but we'll throw him aside. But of the big 3 we saw in the NFC, all older guys. In the AFC, we saw Lamar, Baker, and Josh Allen. Forget Mahomes because he's on another level, but just among those 3 guys. The parallels between the two, do you, for each of those 3 guys, and just quick answer here, just gut feeling, of those 3 guys, Baker, Josh Allen, Lamar, do you see those 3 possibly being, not necessarily on their level of greatness, but being 3 playoff stalwarts? Or do you see them more along the lines of Wentz and Goff the last few years, where they had their big season and then they pulled back and they were kind of, you know, ebbs and flows? Which track do you see each of those 3 guys taking?
I would say that the easiest 2 to answer that for are Lamar and Allen, because I think they're clearly, you know, a level above Mayfield right now. And listen, Baker had a strong season. As the season went on, he definitely started to click better with Stefanski. I don't know if it's like a Ewing theory with Odell going down with injury, but like they did look pretty good in the second half of the season. But again, Lamar is the reigning unanimous MVP. Like Josh Allen just had an MVP candidate type season. So I think those 2 are definitely a step ahead. But more importantly, I have a lot more faith in those organizations. So when you ask if these guys are going to be playoff stalwarts, I think yes, just because the Ravens have been a playoff stalwart. They've made 9 of 13 playoffs since John Harbaugh came to town. The Bills, I think Sean McDermott looks like a great coach. You know, their GM is really good. As long as Dayball is staying, which is for at least this next season, like I think they have a really, really strong coaching staff. So I definitely expect both of those organizations to not only be in the playoffs, but be in the second round of the playoffs and be competing for the conference championship for the next, 5 to 6 years at the very least. The Browns are trickier because historically they've been so bad. I mean, I don't really know what the nicest way is to put it. They just have been the laughing stock of the NFL for decades. But I do believe that they can be a regular contender. I think that the depth in the AFC, I mean, because you get into guys like Herbert, Tannehill has played like a top 10 quarterback the last season and a half. They're going to add Trevor Lawrence. Maybe Justin Fields comes to the conference as well. Like there is just such a, Tua obviously is not going to be coming off an injury next season.
Deshaun Watson.
Maybe, yeah. I didn't even think of Deshaun. Like there's so many people in this, there's so many quarterbacks in this conference that I saw somebody make the comparison that I think is really great, that the AFC is going to be like the NBA's Western Conference going forward. And it really does feel like that because the NFC, you have Kyler, Russ is still like 32, 33. That's really it for guys you believe in. I mean,
you see the three big guys that played last week are all aging out. So that's really
again, that's a long-winded way of saying definitely I believe that for the Bills and Ravens. And the Browns, I believe that they will be in the conversation most seasons, but like they could be the one of those fringe like 7 seed, 8 seed, 9 seed, like in that range year in and year out, despite winning 10 games. Like that's how strong the AFC could be moving forward.
All right, Worm, you're a friend of the pod. You listen to it. You know what comes next. Swift 7 in trivia. You see the little clock ticking down there because we're still broke and not paying for the upgraded Zoom. So we got 8.5 minutes here. Let's get into the Swift 7. Favorite sports memory from when you were at UMD?
The only time I got to rush the court, which was the very last home game I went to against UVA, who was a top 5 team at the time. And I hate UVA more than even Duke because I'm from Virginia. My parents went to Virginia Tech, so did my sister and brother-in-law. So getting to rush the court in the final ACC game that Maryland ever played was pretty cool.
All right. Favorite moment in Ravens history that has nothing to do with the Super Bowls, because obviously those are the top 2.
If it doesn't have to be in the Super Bowl game, but it can be part of the run, then the Mile High Miracle is the obvious choice. I watched that at a bowling alley with the TV on over the lanes with my family in New Jersey. And I was like, I will never forget that moment.
All right. Over under 2.5 rings for Mahomes in the span that started last year. So basically, will he win 2 of the next 4? I go with 5-year span because personally, I think a 5-year run kind of constitutes a dynasty. So essentially the question is, do you think he'll win 2 of the next 4? Yes or no?
I hate how little hesitation I have here, but over.
All right. I agree 100%. 4, of all the Marvel, Star Wars, and Pixar movies, all of them, you get to watch one on a loop for the rest of your life. Which one is it?
Whew. The Incredibles.
All right.
Dude, but there are The Incredibles.
There's a lot of good competition there. That's one that if you ask me again tomorrow, I might have a completely different answer.
Worm, favorite Ravens player of all time?
Torrey Smith.
Really?
From Virginia, like me, a Terp like me, obviously a Raven, a big fan, and just like an awesome dude and like a great, like he's probably my favorite athlete of all time.
Nice. Sports venue you most want to get to that you haven't been to?
Ooh. I'm not really a tennis guy, but I walked outside Wimbledon when I went to visit Europe back after freshman year of college. And it just felt very historic being there. I'd really like to see, actually go into Wimbledon.
That's number 1 currently on my list.
Really?
And pick to win the Super Bowl.
I'm going to say the Bills. Just they have a team of destiny feeling. I don't think they've played their best game yet in the playoffs. I think they are one of the few teams that can go toe-to-toe with KC's offense if things are clicking on the right day. And Stephon Diggs is a Terp. So,
true.
I do think it'd be impressive if the Bills could win it because that means they're beating Patrick Mahomes and then either Brady or Rodgers. That would be impressive.
For whatever reason, I have this really gut feeling that it's not going to, I just don't see Brady winning the Super Bowl this year. They're the first team I'm ruling out.
Not enough people are talking about the fact that if they win, they get a home game. Like that's never happened before, and nobody's talking about that.
But it's a home game in a year where they're not going to have.
That's true too.
Well, I guess Florida maybe they will.
They do have fans. They've been having fans all year.
But not.
Worm, we got 5.5 minutes left. The trivia is how we end our interviews. I made it real simple for you. Do you know the 5 leading wide receivers in Ravens history?
In terms of yards.
In terms of yards. 90 seconds.
Probably not, but we'll give it a try.
I'm going to be honest with you. One of them is going to be surprising. The other 4 you probably should get.
And these are receivers, right? Not just any pass catchers?
No, these could be receivers, tight ends.
Okay. Yeah. All receiving yards. Okay.
Yes.
Derek Mason.
He's number 1.
So he's the easy one. It's hard to tell because so many of them, it's like Bolden was great, but he was only there a couple years. I'm gonna
15 seconds
guess.
into it.
I'm gonna guess my guy Tori.
Tori's number
He's number
3.
three.
That is correct.
Okay.
Still got all 3 of your strikes, only 30 seconds in, or 20 seconds, excuse me. Can't do math.
Did Heap just from longevity?
Number
Odds
2.
number 2.
Number 2. Okay. Ooh, I feel good. I don't feel good going forward though. Did Ray Rice?
Yes.
Yes,
Number
Worm.
5.
That
One
was
more.
the tough one.
Oh, okay.
You
How much
should
time
get
do I have
it. You
left?
should get it now.
You're 45 seconds into it.
Steve Smith?
Nah, not
Those
Steve.
3 years? I'm trying to think who. Again, all the guys that I think of are the best. We're not there very long.
Once it comes to you, you'll know it.
If it comes to me.
If it comes to you.
30 seconds. So got 2
geez.
strikes to work with too, if you want to throw out a name.
Let's say. I mean, God, I know he wasn't there long. Bolden.
No,
I'll
Bolden.
say
One strike.
You got 10
One
seconds
strike
left.
10 seconds left. Throw a Hail Mary.
I'm
Do
gonna get so close. Mark Clayton.
Yes!
Yes!
Mark Clayton.
Oh
Well
my
done.
God, at the buzzer.
That was amazing. I was
Mason?
like, just,
Mason was 5,777. Heap was 5,492. And then there was a big drop off. Torrey was close to 3,600. Clayton was just over 3,100. And then Ray Rice, 3,034.
wow.
Ray
what a
Rice,
perf-
I did not know. I saw that and I'm like, did he really?
Yeah, I mean, I just like how many dump offs did Joe Flacco have to him?
Yeah.
Over the, I mean, Flacco was so confident in Ray Rice's receiving ability that on 4th and 29, he dumped it off to him.
Yeah.
And he got it. I mean, that's
true.
like obviously there's the off-field stuff with Rice, but like when he was playing in his prime, like he was as fun a dual threat running back as the Ravens have ever had.
Of course. And now
Or-
PJ just
yeah.
started his Marvel movies, so we could get on him for that going forward. But
I cannot believe that.
You know what it was? You know what it was? Is because I always had this thought that like Marvel was kind of like Star Wars, and I just never got into Star Wars. So I'm like, I don't think I'd like the Marvel movies. But then my
Totally.
brother was watching them the past couple weeks, and he's like, "Oh, these are good."
Wait, so
And
can you clarify the order you're watching them? Because I was confused with the way you were texting. Are you watching them in like chronological, like, oh, Captain America took place in World War One?
Yes.
Or are you watching them like in the order they were released? The movie.
the order that they were released. So
Okay.
Captain America and the First Avenger was first, then Captain Marvel was second.
No, but-
then
but
Iron
Iron-
Man-
Oh, you're watching it in chronological
Yeah,
order.
you're not watching.
You're watching it
release
in
order.
timeline order. You're not watching it
Timeline,
in release
yes.
order.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That's fine too. I would say chronological as far as time periods for this one. I would go with if you're new to it, just because I think it's a great way to watch it. I know Worm, you're a big advocate of watching it in the order they were released, but with the benefit of being new to the party and late to the party, I think I would have watched it in timeline order too.
I will say that I'm more comfortable with the chronological order with Marvel than I am for Star Wars. I think Star
Fair.
Wars, you have to go release order because you're not going to appreciate the prequels and the rise of Darth Vader if you haven't experienced him as this incredible villain in the middle movies. So I am more okay with it with Marvel than I would have been if this was happening for Star Wars.
All right, and we're very okay with how you performed today, so we might
Yeah,
actually have
Worm,
you back
nice-
instead of a
nice
guest
job.
spot, like a surprise. So
That's three appearances on here. Is that the
that is the most. That is the
Am I the
most if
title
you're counting your little peekaboos that you had in there for
As-
Pixar and some Ravens talk.
Pixar concierge?
Good seeing you, Worm. Take it easy.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Once again, that was Ryan Wormeli, and he did nail his trivia question, Joe.
Right at the
Ray
buzzer.
Rice, I mean, who would have thunk it? I looked at that trivia question, and I was trying to think of something that would be good to Worm. I knew we'd be talking about whether or not the Ravens needed a receiver. And I'm like, let me see who the top 5 guys of all time are for the Ravens receiving yards. I knew Mason would be up there and Torrey. I had a feeling Mark Clayton, Todd Heap, but Ray Rice, I'm like, I don't know if Worm's going to get that
When I saw
one.
you type that
Sure
one,
enough.
put that one in for him, I got 3 of them, but those last 2 of Clayton and Rice, no shot. And I'm not a Ravens fan, obviously,
right.
so tougher for me, but I still wasn't sure if he would get Ray Rice being that, again, all the off-field stuff, his career cut short. by his own fault, obviously. I didn't know if that would pop into the mind. It didn't pop into my mind, certainly. I didn't think he was there long enough. But again, it goes back to the larger issue that the Ravens have not had that caliber of receiver ever.
No.
So when that is your all-time receiving list, it's kind of embarrassing, actually.
A little bit. I mean, not good
they
to
had a
have
chance
running
to correct it.
backs. Not good to have running backs on the all-time receiving list. All right, Joe. Now we talked about the Nick Sirianni move and him going to the Eagles. Now the Texans are the last head coaching spot available, and they're trying to make this big decision with Deshaun Watson. And it seems like pretty much every team in the league, other than maybe 6 or 7, really should make a phone call to Houston. And your Jets
Absolutely
have the best package by far. If it's not the Jets, if it's not the Jets, which team would you say you're most worried about?
I mentioned it before when we were talking with Worm, and obviously, like there's homerism coming through that I want him to be a Jet, Deshaun Watson. But if the report is true that they want at least 3 first-round picks, the Jets and the Dolphins are the 2 best teams as far as a trade partner.
Yes.
Now, as far as teams who should make the call, the Niners should be on the phone. The Colts should be on the phone, but there's no way they're trading him in division. So scratch the Colts off the list. Forget about that conjecture. I really think Washington should be on the list. I was just going to say, I really think Washington should pick up the phone.
Definitely.
But the 2 best teams for it would be the Dolphins and the Jets. Now, the Dolphins are an interesting question mark because I think they're sold on Tua. We're sold on Tua. And I think the general consensus is that he showed who he is in a couple of big games this year when they let him loose. He struggled when they tried to put a leash on him and, just different kind of make him a game manager that he's not. So when he has a full off season, and not just a full off season of like being in the NFL, a full off season where he could actually do stuff, because he couldn't actually do stuff recovering from the hip injury. So now that he has a full off season, I think he's fine. I think the Dolphins would be better suited to actually use the picks they have and just build a ridiculous team around him. So it leaves the Jets. And obviously I'm a homer, so I'm going to come across like that. But I'm glad you kind of agree with me and back me up. So it's not just the homerism talking here. They have 2 first-round picks this year. The number 2 pick, they got the Seattle pick. Mm-hmm. Next year, they have their pick and the Seattle pick. And obviously beyond that, they have all of their own picks. So if they want to not go ahead and jeopardize 2023, you can just pick 3 of these next 4 first round. The number 2 pick, both Seattle picks, done. And in that case, contextually, you essentially traded Jamal Adams in the number 2 pick for Deshaun Watson. That's a home run. But as far as starting to connect all the dots, it's hard not to start finding that breadcrumb trail lead to the Jets. Richard Sherman went on a podcast, and he straight up said, if I'm Deshaun, I'm trying to find a way to New York. Now, that's a guy in Richard Sherman who played under Saleh, who, if I had to bet today, Richard Sherman will be a Jet week 1 next season because he is a free agent, and he probably wants to follow Saleh, and the Jets need a corner. Mm-hmm. So it was essentially legal tampering because Richard Sherman's not tied to a team at the moment, and he knows he's probably going to end up with the Jets, so he's trying to steer Deshaun there. But now, as the reports about the Texans have been coming out in the Deshaun breakup, I guess we could call it the early rumblings of a breakup, not official yet, obviously. He wanted them to interview Saleh and Bieniemy. First 2 guys, he wanted Saleh. They didn't even interview Saleh. Then they only interviewed Bieniemy after he came out and said that he wanted Bieniemy and didn't even interview him. So if his top coach that he wants to play with is Saleh, who is he coaching? The Jets. Richard Sherman is pointing him to the Jets. The Jets have the best package to offer. The Jets, if they get him, still have $70 million in cap space to now surround him with Allen Robinson and put Joe Thuney at guard. By the way, Deshaun Watson has been liking on Twitter and Instagram jersey swaps of him in Jets uniforms. By the way, his agent has been posting videos in which he's directly referencing the Jets on his Instagram and on his Twitter, and he's liking Jets content. By the way, he's really good friends with James Harden, who just also forced his way from Houston to New York. So all of these things are just giant arrows towards it happening. Now, whether it does or doesn't happen, That's up to the Texans if they do want to truly move on from him, or they would rather appease all of his demands, which they should absolutely do. He's a great character guy. If you read the backstory on the Texans with Guy Easterby and their ownership, they have just done a great job of alienating everyone from Andre Johnson to Deshaun Watson to DeAndre Hopkins to J.J. Watt. They've alienated everybody. So if they change their ways, maybe he stays. Conventional wisdom still might say the most logical explanation is he stays. But if not, and I'm getting way too excited about it, only to probably get let down in the end. But it makes too much sense, and it would be a total seismic shift in the AFC, because for what we were talking about earlier, as far as the favorites, you all of a sudden have to start talking about the Jets as being one of them, because like I said, they still have $70 million in cap space after they would get Deshaun. And Allen Robinson also liked a tweet about Deshaun going to the Jets, and he liked a jersey swap that had Allen Robinson and Deshaun on the Jets. I know it's
I'm
nothing,
not ready to make him a favorite. Maybe a playoff berth.
Well, I'm saying, as far as not immediately this year, but down the road, you're looking at a team now that has a core on offense of a franchise left tackle, a franchise left guard, because the worst kept secret in the NFL right now is that Joe Thuney is going to be a Jet. The reason that the Patriots franchise tagged him last year out of nowhere is because they knew he was going to go to the Jets if he wasn't franchise tagged. So now you got one of the best left sides of the offensive line in the league. You got a top receiver in free agency also that they're probably going to go ahead and sign, whether it's Robinson or whoever. You've got Denzel Mims already there. You've got a defense that has more pieces than people realize, and you're adding Saleh into that, who just coached a bunch of nobodies on the Niners to a top 5 defense with all the injuries they had this year. Like all year long, we joked calling them the 39ers.
Yeah.
You know, they with no talent, he got them to a top 5 team. So all of a sudden, with that kind of quarterback, that kind of talent, all that extra cap space, and the fact that you wouldn't really be depleting your draft stock, I mean your draft ammo, because all you're doing is trading the 2 picks you got for Jamal Adams. Starting next season, they wouldn't be in any sort of hole with their draft picks like when then the Redskins traded for RG3. All they would be doing is trading their current excess. So it's a perfect situation, and they would be favorites, among the favorites within a couple of years, but they don't immediately be a playoff team. And I got to stop like going on social media.
You're just going on an absolute tangent right now, but I can see your excitement, as you should be. I mean, I think there's a real possibility Watson lands in New York. Like you said, it's all up to the Texans. They have the last head coaching spot available. Eric Bieniemy is still available. So I think the only shot that they have is at least to give the guy an interview, give him a chance. I mean, you got to give Watson something, or else he's probably going to force his way out the door. You mentioned the other Houston star that he's tight with that left for New York, James Harden, is over with the Nets. And last night we got a taste of who would take the last shot between Kyrie, Harden, and Durant. Now, Durant got the last shot. It wasn't the best of looks. They lost in double overtime to the Cavs. But, Joe, look, these three, I think they're going to work together. I still think the Lakers are my favorite. But the Nets are going to have to outscore teams, because what's happening is what we thought they would happen. They're going to be horrible on defense. They're going to be great on offense. But come to playoff time, those guys are going to buckle down. They're going to play defense, and the scoring's going to be there. I still think they need an inside threat, an inside presence. Jordan is good on defense, but losing Jared Allen was a nice piece for them a little bit offensively. But when you have those 3 guys, I mean, you know, people will want to come play with you. I think that maybe a big man will force their way out of somebody and be like, hey, trade me to Brooklyn, get a draft pick or something like that. But, this Nets 3, now that Kyrie's back, they are going to be a fun team to watch offensively.
Absolutely. And like you said, what we've seen the last week is exactly what we thought. They gave up 142 last night to the Cavs, was it?
Yeah,
and
like
that's
double
the Cavaliers.
147, I think, in double OT.
Yeah, it was double OT, but still, at the end of regulation, I think it was, I want to say it was like 113s or something like that. And I think at the end of the first overtime, it was tied at 127. So they're not going to be a good defense team in the regular season. We can't evaluate this team until it gets later on.
Yes.
Like I said last week, even when it comes to the playoffs, those first two rounds, first round is going to be a cakewalk, as it always seems to be in the NBA. Second round, they might have a test, but it's going to come together. I'm not worried about this team just because they had a bad night last night defensively, but we have seen that they are going to be exactly as we imagined, scary on offense. Last night, they started the game 10 of 10 from the field. Even Jeff Green getting involved too. They're going to be a very, very scary team. And another very scary basketball team right now is actually your Bama basketball team, which is never a topic of conversation.
Now, Joe, they are on fire right now. 7-0 in SEC play. They won their last two games by 30 points. Lenardi had them as a 2 seed yesterday. They dropped back down to a 3 today because I think Houston won or Wisconsin won to put him back on the 2 line. But, Joe, I'm going to say something that might shock you, but I really don't think it's that big of a statement. We all agree Gonzaga is – I mean, they're on a different level. Baylor's really, really good too. But as great as Baylor is defensively, I just don't think their offense can keep pace with Gonzaga. If there is a team in college basketball this year that has any shot of beating Gonzaga, I think it's Alabama. And because of their style of play and the way they shoot the 3 ball. I don't think they'll beat Gonzaga, but if you're looking at a team that can beat them, you're going to have to outscore them. That's the only way. We saw Virginia play Gonzaga, and Gonzaga still scored 95 on them. Yeah. So we know they can score on any kind of defensive team. Bama had 60 points in the first half against LSU the other night. LSU's awful defensively, but you still hang a 60-piece on somebody. Pretty impressive. They made 23 3-pointers. If anybody's going to beat Gonzaga, I think it's Bama just because of the way that they play. With that being said, Bama can lose in the first round in the 3-14 game because that's just the way it is. If they're shooting well, they can beat anybody. If they're not shooting well, they can lose to anybody. But the job Nate Oates has done, the way they're playing right now, I mean, they've won at Tennessee. They've beaten Florida. They've won at Kentucky, who's not even going to make the NIT maybe. They're 4-10. The fact that Bama is a 3 seed, Joe, and North Carolina, Duke, and Michigan State are fighting for their tournament lives just brings a smile to my face. It's really, it's wonderful to see.
Sign of the times. But, hey, look, you gave me the floor to put my tinfoil hat on and figure out the breadcrumbs from leading Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson from Houston to the Jets. I give you the floor for your Bama basketball. But on a larger scale right now, the claim that I made 2 months or so ago now, still holding true. I said, I don't think at any point this year, either Gonzaga or Baylor will fall below the 4th ranking in the country because I could see a third team, whether it's a Nova, whether at the time it was an Iowa who has since been battered around, whether it was a surprise team like Texas who got as high as 4. I could have seen them falling from down to the 4 spot with one of those teams taking 3. But I don't think – I said back then I didn't think they would fall below 4 all year. Hasn't even changed. Ever since I said that, they've been 1 and 2 the whole way. Those two teams clearly far and away the best teams in college basketball. And they're beating good competition too.
They are.
Well, not Gonzaga anymore because they've gotten into their conference slate. But when they beat Iowa, they beat Virginia, they were thrashing all the top teams. Baylor in conference play has played at Texas. They played Texas Tech. They've been beating them. So
Kansas, they just beat
Kansas. Exactly. So right now they're a little bit more impressive, but when it comes down to it, Gonzaga, I think is better. Those two teams, man, teams to beat. I think when it comes down to making my bracket, I'm dragging Gonzaga as far as I can until they play Baylor. I'm dragging Baylor as far as they can until they play Gonzaga, and then I'll have to think about that one, and then I'll fill everything else in. But those are the first 2 things I'm doing. When it comes
Baylor still worries me just a little bit because I just worry about their offense in the tournament, and we've seen it with all these Virginia teams, and as good as they are defensively, and I know Baylor is better offensively.
A lot of guys. They're way better than Virginia offensively.
They do.
This Baylor team reminds me of the Virginia team that actually did win it all. Because that Virginia team that actually did win it all finally, they had guys who could give you instant offense.
Well, look at what it took.
It took a lot, but Baylor's got 3 guys that could give you instant offense. And still, it took so much for Virginia because that team is so set in their style that it was almost like, oh crap, we have an offense, kind of. What do we do now? Like they didn't know, like me in pictures, like I don't know what to do with my hands. We got an offense, I don't know what to do with it. But this Baylor team, I think, is really special too, and they're battle tested, tournament tested, because of the way that they have to go through this Big 12 schedule and the other top teams, Kansas, Texas Tech, that they've had to go through. And they've made deep tournament runs previously in the past. They probably were my pick to get to the Final Four had last year's tournament happened. So I'm excited to see what they can do this year.
We'll see. Everybody's going to have those two in their championship game, and it just never works out that way.
It never does.
It never does. But in a year like this, with all the crazy that's happened, we'll see what happens. Joe, best bets and trivia time. We both went 2 and 3 last week. So you still maintain a 3-game lead. What is your number 5 this week?
And remember, this week we are picking both spreads. We're picking 4 spreads and a prop. That was our agreed upon thing for this week.
Correct.
The 4 spreads could be first half, second half, it could be game, whatever. It could be over unders, first half over.
That's
four traditional things and then 1 prop.
Yep.
So I'm going to go with my prop as my 5th best bet to start off with. And it's going to be Tom Brady, yes, interception at -105, the way I'm looking at it right now. I think the way that defensive front has been playing for the Packers with Gary and the Smiths, and with the talent they have at corner and with the talent they have at safety and Darnell Savage, I think they will turn Brady over at least once. It's supposed to be clear now, the weather all week long. They were trying to see, it could have been a driving snowstorm, which would have been incredible to watch, but they don't think it's going to snow. It's just going to be cold, not too windy. So I don't think the weather is going to be a factor. I just think the way the Packers play defense right now, and think of the things that Brady struggles with. He really struggles with interior pressure. He has struggled in the past when it comes to safeties. Even last week, he had a couple that probably should have been picked off against Washington. He had a couple that probably should have been picked off. I think this Packers team turns him over at least once with an interception.
All right. My number 5 is a prop as well. I have Devontae Adams touchdown plus a Packers win at +138. Nobody can cover Devontae Adams. It's that simple. Green Bay is going to
have a good passing defense.
Right. I'm with you. If I had to bet over unders this week, I saw a stat that the last 10 AFC, NFC championship games, I think the over-under is like 7-2-1 or something. So in these games, I mean, it's high scoring when you get to this level. The teams are so good. And if it's a high-scoring game, I just don't see a scenario where Adams doesn't score a touchdown. He scored 1 last week, and I think he'll score 1 this week too.
I'm going to knock out number 3 and number 4 for me right now.
Okay.
You mentioned the totals. I'm going over in both games. In the Bucs Packers game, it's at 51.5. In Chiefs Bills, it's at 54. This Chiefs Bills game, I very much see, as long as Mahomes is fine, I very much see both teams getting into the 30s. And at the very least, the winning team gets into the 30s. And I don't think this game is decided by more than 7 points. So with that logic, if I have the winning team getting to at the very least 31, I don't see the losing team having any less than 24. Math tells you that's an over. So give me the over 54 in that one. And then Bucs Packers, like I said, it dodged the bullet, it seems, with the weather as far as the wind and the snow. It's just going to be like 26 degrees with minimal winds. So the weather's not going to be a factor. Yes, the Bucs are a Florida warm weather team, but Brady is not a warm weather quarterback. He's been a cold weather quarterback his whole career, so it doesn't impact him. Obviously, it doesn't impact the Packers. I think this game, same thing like the Chiefs-Bills game. If not both teams, at least the winning team gets into the 30s. So I'm going over in both of these.
My number 4 is Buffalo, Kansas City first half under. I'm with you. I'd like the game total of the over, but for the first half, Mahomes working back from that concussion. I just think Andy Reid's going to maybe lean on that run game a little bit, see how he's moving around. And then with the Bills, while we saw them just throw against the Ravens, I think in the first half, there's going to be a little more running with Singletary, try and chew up some clock, maybe some methodical drives. So for the first half, I do like under 26.5 Buffalo, Kansas City. And then my number 3, I like Green Bay -2.5 first half against Tampa Bay. Green Bay's been so good starting the season fast this year, especially at home. Tampa Bay was behind New Orleans for much of that first half. They were down 20-13 in the second half. I just think Green Bay starts fast and they lead by 3 or more heading to the locker room.
All right. And now the reason we haven't really, at least on my end, the reason we kind of punted on dissecting these games earlier in the show, because we knew we would dissect them now.
Yeah.
So I'll get down to it. My number 2 pick is going to be Packers -3 against the Bucs. And my take on this game, the Bucs are a really good team against the run. And I think a lot of the people are going to remember the Bucs thrashing the Packers early in the year. I personally would feel comfortable with this game all the way up to -6 with the Packers. I think they're that good, and they showed it last week. Yes, I picked against them last week. That was more of a me sticking to my guns sort of thing than anything else, though. They're just incredible. The one question mark I think they had all year was, will the defense rally? And it has with that front and with that secondary. So I don't think that's an issue anymore. I think offensively, Jones might not have as big of a day as you'd think, especially because they're a really good run defense, the Bucs. But again, with Adams, with Lazard catching that touchdown last week, he's a viable option. Valdez-Scantling, always a deep threat. Tunyon has been tremendous at tight end. This Packers team, offensively, might be the most talented offensive team that Aaron Rodgers has had since he won the Super Bowl, back then when he had Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, I think Jermichael Finley still. This rivals that. It's probably better. Adams is the best receiver he's ever had. I don't think the Bucs can stop that. This is a strength on a weakness. The Bucs' Achilles heel is their passing defense. And the fact that Brees and the Saints couldn't exploit that last week just shows you how far gone Drew Brees unfortunately is. Rodgers is not Drew Brees. Rodgers will exploit that. And on the flip side, like I said, the Packers defense has been playing a lot better. And the Bucs offense, obviously tremendous, but Antonio Brown, not 100%. Mike Evans, I have a hard time believing is at 100% after his knee came out from under him in the last regular season game. Godwin, I don't find him to be 100%. You still see him playing with those 2 fingers on his hand wrapped. I think he would have caught a touchdown pass last week if not for that. There was another one that he dropped. So as talented as they are, I don't think any of them are 100%. So I think the Packers will stop them. The Bucs can't stop the Packers. Give me the Packers -3. Like I said, I would have felt comfortable with this all the way up to -6.
Totally with you. The Packers are my number 1 play. I got them -3 as well. To me, I agree with everything you said. On top of it, though, it's just turnovers. We talked about New Orleans wins that game.
That's why Brady is my prop to throw an interception. Exactly.
And Tampa didn't turn the ball over last week. New Orleans turned it over 4 times. There's your ball game. And when these two teams met in week 1, Green Bay was up 10-0. And the play that flipped everything was Aaron Rodgers throwing a pick 6. And if you're banking on Aaron Rodgers throwing a pick 6, especially at home, not going to happen. If they turn it over, it'll be a fumble maybe. I just can't see Rodgers throwing an interception. He's going to take care of the ball. And the way that they dominated that Rams defense, even with Aaron Donald out, they were running the ball. They were throwing the ball. They were just the first 5 drives they scored points on. You can't stop that offense. And because of how Tampa Bay looked against New Orleans, because of it's Tom Brady in the playoffs, I think is the reason why this game is close. But when you really dive deeper, I'm with you. This spread should be like -6. I think Green Bay is clearly the better team, and I think they win.
And on Twitter, there's a bunch of betting guys that I follow, a couple closer than others, and 2 of them, they had, before the slate started last week, they tweeted out what they guessed the lines would be for the following week, depending on the combination, obviously, whatever it turned out to be. Mm-hmm. And I noticed he initially said in that guessing game sort of ordeal, obviously, he thought this would be -6.5, and it's -3. So I got to take the value on that. Definitely. And again, that was my number 2. You said that's your number 1.
Yeah.
So all that's left for me is my number 1, and for you, your number 2. For me, my number 1, it is the Chiefs -3. We talked about this with Worm. I do not. It's a very easy. A question I asked him, over 2.5 rings in this 5-year span for Mahomes. It's an easy over for me. As long as he is cleared and healthy, and all indications seem to be, I'm not picking against the Chiefs. I know their games have been closer recently. They've been winning by 6, by 5, by 7. But that number of 3, I'm figuring at the worst, this game's 34-31. I'm getting a push at the worst. It's tough. You don't see it often in a game landing on 1 or 2, so I'm comfortable taking the 3. I do think it's a close game, but again, that number 3 is huge. If it was 3.5, I would have made it number 2, and I would have made the Packers number 1. But at 3, feel comfortable with it. I just cannot see why. I know that the Bills have been that sort of team of destiny, but as far as a football standpoint, it just doesn't do it for me. This Chiefs defense, I can't see why people have not been talking more about the Chiefs defense. Dan Orlovsky pointed it out, former guest of the pod. Obviously, hope to have him on again at some point when the season ends, looking ahead to the draft and whatnot. But he pointed it out. Down the stretch, if you take away the Chargers game, this defense was averaging 21 points against per game. The defense has been tremendous for KC. I think they can. Steve Spagnuolo, going back to his days with the Giants, he's got a knack for cooking up these game plans in the playoffs defensively and giving the other team fits. I think the Bills offense has some trouble. You talked about the Ravens being a rhythm offense when we were on with Worm. The Bills this year have also struck me as a rhythm offense, and they kind of had their momentum halted last week. Not their own fault. It was the weather's fault. But I don't see them getting all the way back up to full speed this week. And I think it's a tougher match than people think against the Chiefs defense that's been playing the way it's playing. And then on the flip side of the ball, I don't see the Bills stopping Mahomes in this offense, again, as long as Mahomes is fine. So I see this game ending up somewhere in the neighborhood of 38-31 Chiefs, 38-34 Chiefs. I think when it comes down to it, just Andy Reid, Pat Mahomes, not picking against him in a game like this.
And I like Buffalo +3 against Kansas City. So you got Packers Chiefs Super Bowl. I have Packers Bills. I think the Bills are actually going to win this thing outright.
All right. I'm not buying into the team of destiny. That's the whole thing here.
Well, I'm not so much on the team of destiny. I just look at the fact that they really shouldn't have beaten the Colts and they shouldn't have beaten the Ravens. I think they were outplayed in both games. But to win both those games, I think says something about how far this team has come. The fact that they have
where's the logic in that? If they shouldn't have beaten the Colts and they shouldn't have beaten the Ravens, you think they beat the Chiefs, who are the gold standard that by which all teams are measured?
I do, because I think their best game is yet to come. I mean, they hadn't won a playoff game in 20 years, and now all of a sudden you've beaten 2 teams back to back. That's impressive. Josh Allen's finally won some playoff games, and that's impressive. And we've talked about, if there's a team that's going to beat Kansas City, it's Buffalo, because they can hang with them. They can score points with them. And I'm just not buying into that KC's this super crazy good team that just can't be beaten. I think there's flaws. I think Cleveland had their chances to win that game last week. Mahomes' injury obviously changed
that was huge.
There were certain, in the first half, Cleveland really missed some opportunities. It's hard to get back to the Super Bowl.
Hey, look, it wouldn't stun me by any means. It wouldn't stun me. But I again, just with what we've seen, sure, the Browns had chances, but how much of that was fluky with Mahomes getting hurt, with Butker missing kicks he doesn't miss? There was a lot of that was fluky. Otherwise, they should have and would have been down by a lot more. I think if Mahomes doesn't get hurt, and we're talking about Butker being what he normally is, similar to what Justin Tucker happened to do last week, that game was well in hand in the fourth quarter and not coming down to will Chad Henne out of nowhere pick up a 3rd and 16 followed by a 4th and inches, So I stick with what I've said all year, that these Chiefs are reminding me of the Warriors in that they all year kind of coasted. When they needed to turn it on, they turned it on. Whenever they went down in the fourth quarter, they bounced back and they won it. There's just something else to them. Pat Mahomes, obviously you take away that Chargers game of last week of the year, but going back to last Labor Day till now, he's 24-1, I think it is. I'm not picking him to get loss number 2 in this game. Maybe in the Super Bowl against the Green Bay Packers. Probably still going to side with the Chiefs when it comes down to it. I'll have to think about it. I get 2 weeks to think about it, but I'm not picking him to lose this one.
All I know is it's tough to get to the Super Bowl back-to-back years. It's really, really hard. And Kansas City's obviously got the team to do it. They got the quarterback to do it and the coach to do it, but it is hard to do. We both agree it's going to be a close game, and when I think it's going to be a close game, I usually lean towards the underdog when they're getting points. So
I would have, like I said, I would have dropped it down in my pecking order if it were 3.5, if it were 4 or something like that. But at 3, I'm not. Look, if the Chiefs win by 1 or they win by 2, that doesn't happen very, very often. So it is what it is. I'll take a push if I get a push at -3. But I'm excited for the fact
that 2 good games. These are going to be really good games.
These 2 could be tremendous classics. I mean, that Packers-Bucs game especially. Like, you giving me Brady and Rodgers for the first ever time in playoff history, with a chance to go to the Super Bowl, for Brady possibly in the home stadium. I'm very
some news too that just dropped like 2 hours ago is the Packers GM just passed away.
He did.
Ted Thompson. So
Former
you don't
GM
think
up
the
until
fact
2017.
GM. So you don't think that Aaron Rodgers playing his first title game at Lambeau, all that going on, there's something happening for the Pack. I think it's there.
Absolutely. But hey, I really hope, I'm really going into this weekend hoping that we get a Mahomes-Rodgers Super Bowl that everybody wants to see. Whether we do or don't, I don't know, but that is the game we all have been hoping to see, and we were robbed of it last year when Mahomes was hurt, and we saw Matt Moore play that game. But I'm really hoping we get it in a Super Bowl. It would probably be the most anticipated hyped Super Bowl of all time. I don't know if I'm wrong in saying that. I know we've had plenty of Super Bowls that have had blue bloods against each other with the Packers and the Steelers and stuff, but Mahomes, Rodgers matching up. Are you kidding me?
Honestly, if Brady wins too, if Brady, I mean, if
Mahomes
Mahomes wins,
as
whoever
long as
wins
Mahomes
the NFC
is in it.
Correct.
But I still think there's more to Mahomes, Rodgers than there is Mahomes Brady, because we've seen Mahomes Brady in back-to-back AFC title games, and I think that not back-to-back AFC title games. We saw it in the one AFC title game. But we've seen it in the regular season multiple times, and we've seen it. But the other thing linking Mahomes and Rodgers is Brady is indisputably the GOAT because of the rings. But for me, Aaron Rodgers, up until Pat Mahomes, is by far the most talented player I've ever seen in the quarterback position. And now Mahomes will supplant him. So we're talking about the 2 probably best players to ever play the position. Again, greatest is a different argument. You got the rings with Brady. It's totally different. But in terms of pure talent,
yes,
they are the 2 most talented players to ever play the position. So that's why that does it for me more than Mahomes Brady does. But either way, we're in for a treat.
Going to be good. All right, Joe, trivia to end it. We're both at 12.5. You said you loved your question that you have for me. So let me hear it. I'm ready.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Let me just get my count back down. Okay. It's championship weekend. I want you to give me 7 of the 9 longest championship droughts, appearances, not wins, not like Super Bowl droughts. The 7 of the 9 longest droughts of teams having not made it to a conference championship game. 7 of the 9.
Okay. So let's see. Ravens no, Steelers no, Bengals, Browns possibly. I'm going to go Browns.
Browns is correct. It's been 28 years.
I'm going to go Bengals.
32 years. That's the longest.
Let's see.
5 more to go. You're only 20 seconds into it.
The Jags just made it. The Texans.
The Texans have never made it. 19 years. They are in the picture. There we go.
Okay. The Colts have made it recently. The Jags have made it. The Titans made it last year.
The top 3 technically.
Okay.
Because the Texans are technically number 1 since they've never been there, even though it's only 19 years.
The Chargers made it with Rivers in 2007. The Raiders haven't been there in a while. Those could possibly too. The Jets recently. The Patriots recently-ish.
You're a minute into it. You got 30 seconds left.
I'll go Dolphins.
The Dolphins are correct.
And I'll go Raiders.
Correct. Got 2 more. That's 5.
I'll go, let's see. I'll go Lions.
Correct. 6. 10 seconds.
And Vikings.
Incorrect.
I'll go Cowboys.
Correct. There you go. At the buzzer, you had 3 seconds left. Of I said 7 of the 9. The 2 you were missing. One you mentioned, the Chargers. They are the 9th.
Oh, okay. So 07 was the cutoff. So
Yep.
Washington, then the football team.
Washington and Detroit. Did you say Detroit?
I did say Detroit.
You said Detroit. I'm sorry. Yeah, Washington. Washington was the
And Washington and the Chargers were the 2.
Yeah.
Okay, got you.
Those were the 2. I cut it off at 9 because after that, then you had teams that were tied. So 9 was my cutoff for that. But there you go. Just like
Washington
Worm,
was going to be my next
buzzer.
guest if it wasn't. Yeah. So all right,
like
nice.
Worm
Yeah, I did like
But
that one.
The numbers are 32 years for the Bengals, 28 for the Browns, 29 for Washington, 29 for Detroit, 28 for the Dolphins, 25 for the Cowboys, 18 for the Raiders, 13 for the Chargers, and like I said, the Texans are technically number 1 on the list because for them it's never, but in being never, it's only 19 years for them. So they would be in the middle of that top 9.
My question for you is Tampa is trying to achieve something that doesn't happen often. They're trying to become a wild card team that wins 3 road playoff games on their route to the Super Bowl. Since 2005, it's only happened 3 times where a team has won 3 games on the road en route to the Super Bowl. Can you name those 3 teams?
All right. The Giants in 07.
That is correct.
And the Ravens when they won the Super Bowl.
No, the Ravens won against the Colts at home in the wild card game that year.
Okay.
So that's one strike.
Since 05, all road games. I want to say when the Steelers played the Cardinals, I want to say the Steelers had a lot of road games in there. I don't know if they were wild card though. I got 1 strike already. Let's see. Lately, it's been a lot of chalk. I'll say the Steelers the year they play the Cardinals.
The Steelers is correct. It wasn't the year they played the Cardinals. It was the year they played the Seahawks in 05.
Oh,
okay.
But
you did get the team right. So you need one more
Steelers
team.
Ones. Okay.
You got 40 seconds left.
Okay. I knew it was one of those. Let's see now.
30 seconds.
What's it? I really thought that the Ravens had done it. I forgot about that Colts game.
You're gonna kick yourself if you don't get this one.
I'm probably going to.
20 seconds left.
Is it the Seahawks as the opponent of the Steelers in that game?
No, it is not the Seahawks.
Okay. Wow.
10 seconds. What you got? 5 seconds. 1 strike left. 5 seconds. Just name a team.
All right. I'm gonna chuck up a Hail Mary here, and I'm gonna say that it was the Giants twice.
No, it was not the Giants twice. It was the Packers the year Rodgers won the Super Bowl.
Wow.
They were the 6th seed. They were the 6th seed that year. They won all their games on the road.
Wow. That crossed my mind, but I remember that year because that was the last year the Jets had made it to the AFC title game. And I remember saying that I thought the Jets would have beaten the Packers because of how they played in the regular season. But I could have sworn that the Packers were better that year. Who won the North?
So let's see the 2010 playoff bracket. I know they were the 6th seed. They beat Philadelphia on the road. Let's see.
So I was going through those 2. I knew it wasn't recent because it's been chalk. So the first thing I did was I went back to from the.
You know what it was? It was the year when they beat the Bears in the NFC title game when Cutler got hurt.
That's right.
That was the year.
I knew the year that the Bears were good. Okay.
So, yep. So Green Bay was actually the let's see. This is the wrong year. This is 2009. I need 2010.
Yeah, the first thing I did was I said, lately it's been all chalk. It hasn't happened in a bit.
Right.
So I started backtracking from the year that the Patriots and the Seahawks played. Before that, the Broncos and the Seahawks. I started going before that.
So Green Bay was a 6th seed. They beat Philly in the wild card round. Then they went to Atlanta. Atlanta was the 1 seed that year, and they demolished them 48-21. And then they beat Chicago in the NFC title game. And then what
was their record that year? Now that you have it up,
their record that year.
This is not me like making an excuse for you.
Yeah, no.
I'm thinking about that year.
They were 10-6 that year. 10-6.
Wow. Okay, that's what threw me off because I remember, I distinctly remember the Jets that year. The Jets lost to the Packers 9-0 in the regular season, I believe it was. And I remember saying to myself, if we play them again, we will beat them. But the Packers at the time, when the Jets played them, because the Jets were also kind of looked at as a very solid team, I remember the Packers going – the things that you randomly remember. I remember the Packers were looked at as one of the best teams in the league that year, but I guess they faltered at some point, finished 10-6, and that was it. And they proved, obviously, that they were the best team in the league that year. But
Yep.
All right.
So there you go. So if Tampa wins, they'd only be the fourth team since 2005 to win 3 straight on the road. It happened.
Does it count though? Because they have the Super Bowl at home.
That's true. That's a great point. Play all those road games just to get a home game in the Super Bowl.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
all right. Well, you go back up by 1 on the trivia. I'll give you that.
We'll
I'll
see
keep
what
my
happens.
the best bets though.
We'll see what happens this week. I'm totally with you on the Packers. Chiefs-Bills should be a great game. I hate betting against Mahomes, but
that's the thing. I'm not doing it. I'm just not doing it.
Look, and I you can't argue with that. I feel you. All right, Joe. Thanks again to Worm for joining us, coming on as an official guest, having him, and we'll see everybody next week.